I was under the kitchen sink, wrestling with a stubborn pipe wrench, when I heard Sophie's voice drift down from upstairs. The tone made me freeze. Soft, intimate, nothing like how she'd spoken to me in months. "Don't worry, he's completely clueless," she whispered into her phone. "I'll meet you at Dale's place after the company party tonight. I love you too." Clueless. The word hit me like a wrench to the gut. I'm Aidan Murphy, 48 years old, owner of Murphy's Auto Repair on Elm Street. I've been fixing broken things for 25 years. Cars, motorcycles, lawnmowers. Apparently, I'd missed the most important repair job of all, my marriage. I stayed perfectly still under that sink, listening to Sophie's footsteps cross the bedroom floor above. 22 years of marriage, and she thought I was clueless. Maybe I had been, but not anymore. The pipe could wait. I had bigger problems to solve. Sophie came downstairs 15 minutes later, dressed in her power suit, the navy blue one that cost more than most people make in a week. She worked at Henderson & Associates, the biggest advertising agency in our mid-sized New England city. Dale Henderson was her boss, a slick 40-something with perfect teeth and a BMW that screamed midlife crisis. "Working late again tonight," she announced, not looking at me as she grabbed her coffee. "Big client presentation." "On a Friday night?" I asked, wiping grease from my hands. "That's how business works, Aidan. Some of us can't just close shop at 5 and crack open a beer." There it was, the contempt that had been building for months. I used to think it was stress from work. Now I understood it was something else entirely. "Have fun at your presentation," I said. She paused at the door, studying my face. For a moment, I thought she might say something real, something honest. Instead, she just shrugged. "Don't wait up." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. After she left, I sat in our kitchen, the one we'd renovated together 5 years ago when things were still good, and tried to piece together the clues I'd been ignoring. The late nights that had become routine, the way she guarded her phone like state secrets, the new lingerie I'd found in her gym bag last week, tags still on, nothing I'd ever seen her wear. My daughter Emma was away at college, which meant the house felt emptier than usual. Just me and the ticking of the grandfather clock Sophie's mother had given us for our 10th anniversary. Back then, Barbara had actually liked me. These days, my mother-in-law treated me like something she'd scrape off her designer shoes. I opened Sophie's laptop. She'd left it on the kitchen counter, another sign of how little she thought of my intelligence. Her email was still logged in. I told myself I was just checking our shared calendar, but that was a lie. I was looking for evidence, and I found it. Hotel reservations, dinner receipts from places I'd never been, credit card statements for an account I didn't know existed. And there, buried in her deleted messages folder, was a chain of emails that made my stomach turn. Dale wasn't just her boss. He was her lover, her escape plan, her ticket to what she called a life that actually matters. The emails went back 6 months, full of promises about leaving me once she figured out the finances. They'd been planning this betrayal while I was downstairs every morning, making her coffee and asking about her day. The last email was from yesterday. "Can't wait to celebrate our future tonight. Room 604 at the Marriott. Bring the champagne. We have so much to toast." Room 604. I memorized the number, though I wasn't sure why yet. I spent the rest of the day at my shop, trying to lose myself in work. Ricky Castellano, who owned the sports bar next door, stopped by around closing time with 2 beers and his usual grin. "You look like someone ran over your dog," he said, handing me a bottle. "What's eating you?" Ricky had been my best friend since high school. He knew me well enough to spot trouble from across the street. I told him everything, the phone call, the emails, the hotel room. He listened without interrupting, which was unusual for Ricky. "So what's the plan?" he asked when I finished. "Plan? Come on, Murphy. You're not the type to just roll over and take it. You're gonna fight back, right? I hadn't thought about fighting back. I'd been too busy feeling sorry for myself. But as I sat there in my shop, surrounded by the tools and machines that had built my life, something shifted inside me. Sophie thought I was clueless, predictable, beneath her notice. Maybe it was time to show her how wrong she was. "Yeah," I said, surprising myself. "I think I am." The company party was at the Riverside Country Club, the kind of place where I usually felt out of my element. Sophie had insisted I wear my one good suit, the same one I'd worn to Emma's high school graduation. I felt like an imposter among all the advertising executives and their perfectly styled spouses. Sophie barely acknowledged me when I arrived. She was holding court near the bar, laughing at something Dale Henderson was saying. He looked exactly like I'd expected. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to fix anything with your own hands. I watched them together, noting the subtle touches, the way they leaned into each other when they talked. Everyone else seemed oblivious, but the signs were obvious once you knew what to look for. When the band started playing, I walked over and tapped Sophie on the shoulder. "Dance with your husband?" I asked. She looked annoyed, but appearances mattered at these events. We moved to the dance floor and I pulled her closer than she wanted to be. "You're holding me too tight," she whispered. "Am I? Sorry. I'm still learning how to handle precious things." Something in my tone made her look up at me. For the first time in months, I had her complete attention. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Perfect. Just enjoying time with my loving wife." The song ended, and she stepped back quickly. I could see Dale watching us from across the room, his expression unreadable. "I need some air," Sophie said. "Good idea. Room 604 might be stuffy tonight." She went completely still. The color drained from her face as she stared at me. "What did you say?" "Nothing important. Just making conversation." I walked away, leaving her standing there in the middle of the dance floor. Dale appeared at her side within seconds, and I watched them have an urgent, whispered conversation near the exit. They left together 10 minutes later. I stayed until the end of the party, making small talk and pretending everything was normal. But inside, I was planning. Sophie wanted to play games? Fine. She just didn't know she was playing against someone who'd learned to be very, very patient. Saturday morning, Sophie slept until noon. When she finally came downstairs, she looked like she'd been hit by a truck, which, in a way, she had. I was at the kitchen table reading the newspaper and drinking coffee like it was any other weekend. "We need to talk," she said. "About what?" "You know what?" I folded the paper carefully and looked at her. Even hungover and guilty, she was still beautiful. That's what made this hurt so much. "I know you went through my email," she continued. "That's a violation of privacy, Aidan." "Privacy? We're married, Sophie. Or did you forget that detail while you were planning your exit strategy?" She sat down across from me, and for a moment, she looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with 25 years ago. Young, vulnerable, real. "It's not what you think," she said. "Really. Because I think you're having an affair with your boss and planning to leave me once you figure out how to take half of everything I've built. Am I wrong?" The silence stretched between us. Outside, I could hear kids playing in the neighbor's yard, normal Saturday sounds from a normal world that suddenly felt very far away. "I never meant for this to happen," she finally said. "But it did happen. For 6 months, apparently. Dale understands me in ways you never could. He sees my potential, my ambitions. With him, I could be someone important. And with me, you're what? Nobody?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. That afternoon, I drove to the Marriott downtown. I didn't have a plan exactly, but I needed to see the place where my marriage had been dismantled. The hotel was nice, not fancy, but respectable. The kind of place where business travelers stayed, and no one asked questions about who came and went. I parked across the street and watched the entrance. After an hour, I saw Dale's BMW pull into the parking garage. Sophie's silver Lexus followed 5 minutes later. They were still meeting, even after last night's confrontation. The audacity was almost impressive. I waited until they went inside, then called the hotel from my cell phone. "Hi, this is Dale Henderson in room 604, I said, deepening my voice slightly. "I think I left my briefcase in the restaurant earlier. Could someone check for me?" "Of course, Mr. Henderson. Let me transfer you to the restaurant." So they were definitely in 604. I filed that information away for later use. Sunday was worse. Sophie barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was with the kind of careful politeness you'd show a stranger. I spent most of the day in my garage, organizing tools and trying to think through my options. I could confront Dale directly, but what would that accomplish? I could file for divorce, but Sophie worked for a law firm's biggest client. She'd have advantages I couldn't match. I could make a scene, but that would just make me look desperate and pathetic. No, I needed something smarter, something that would hit them where it hurt most: their reputations, their careers, their comfortable little fantasy. Monday morning, I opened early and was under the hood of a Toyota Camry when my phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "Stay away from what doesn't concern you. This is your only warning." I stared at the screen, then started laughing. Dale Henderson, corporate executive and master manipulator, was threatening me via text message. The man really didn't understand who he was dealing with. I forwarded the message to my email and saved it in a folder I labeled Evidence. Then I got back to work on the Camry. Some things needed fixing, and I was good at my job. That evening, Sophie came home with a new story. "I'm going to be traveling more for work," she announced. "Dale thinks I'm ready for bigger clients, more responsibility." "How exciting for you both." "This is a good thing, Aidan. More money, better opportunities." "More hotel rooms?" She glared at me. "I'm trying to build a career here." "Is that what we're calling it?" The fight that followed was spectacular. Sophie accused me of being jealous, small-minded, and incapable of supporting her dreams. I accused her of being a liar, a cheat, and a coward who couldn't even be honest about what she was doing. "You want to know the truth?" she finally screamed. "Fine. Yes, I'm having an affair. Yes, I'm in love with Dale. And yes, I'm planning to leave you. Are you happy now?" "Ecstatic," I said calmly. "Thanks for clearing that up." She stormed upstairs and slammed the bedroom door. I sat in my kitchen, listening to her throw things around above my head, and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. Not anger. That would come later. This was something more focused, more dangerous. Sophie wanted a war? She was about to get one. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years. Instead of opening the shop, I drove to the public library and spent 3 hours researching Dale Henderson and his company. The internet was a wonderful thing when you knew how to use it. Henderson and Associates was privately owned, which meant Dale answered to no corporate overlords. But they did have clients, big ones, and those clients cared about image and reputation. I found news articles about their biggest accounts, photos from company events, even Dale's social media profiles. The man was married, had been for 15 years. His wife Jennifer was a pediatric nurse who volunteered at animal shelters in her spare time. They had twin daughters, both in middle school. His Facebook page was full of family photos and posts about his girls' soccer games. Perfect family man, at least in public. I also learned that Henderson and Associates was up for a major contract with the city, a tourism campaign worth nearly $2 million. The decision would be made by the city council in 2 weeks. Bad publicity could torpedo that deal, and Dale knew it. By the time I left the library, I had a plan. Not a complete one, but the beginning of something that might actually work. Sophie and Dale thought they were so clever, so sophisticated, so much smarter than the clueless mechanic who fixed cars for a living. They were about to learn that underestimating people was a dangerous mistake. That afternoon, I drove past Dale's house, a colonial in the historic district, probably worth 3 times what Sophie and I had paid for our place. Jennifer Henderson was in the front yard, planting flowers with her daughters. They looked happy, normal, completely unaware that their husband and father was planning to destroy their family. I felt a stab of sympathy for them. They were innocent victims in this mess, just like I was. But sympathy wouldn't save my marriage or restore my dignity. Sometimes innocent people got hurt when the guilty finally faced consequences. I parked down the street and took photos of the house, the address, the family scene. More evidence for my growing file. Wednesday night, Sophie didn't come home at all. She texted around midnight, "Working late, staying at hotel, don't wait up." I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to the Marriott and confirmed that both their cars were in the parking garage. Then I went home and did something I'd never done in 22 years of marriage. I changed the locks. Let her explain that to Dale when she tried to get back in. Sophie discovered the new locks Thursday morning when she tried to sneak back into the house at 6 a.m. I was already up, drinking coffee and watching the news, when I heard her key fail to work. She rang the doorbell, then knocked, then pounded on the door with increasing fury. I let her stew for 10 minutes before opening up. "What is this?" she demanded, pushing past me into the foyer. "Home security upgrade. You said you'd be staying at hotels more often, so I figured I should protect the house." "This is my home too." "Is it? Because your behavior suggests you've found somewhere else you'd rather be." She was still wearing yesterday's clothes, and her makeup was smudged. The walk of shame looked different when you were 45 and married, but it was still recognizable. "I need to shower and change," she said. "Of course. Just remember that guests should ask permission before using the facilities." The look she gave me could have melted steel, but I was past caring about her anger. I had bigger concerns now. That morning at the shop, I put my plan into motion. First, I called Henderson and Associates and asked to speak with Dale. His secretary said he was in meetings all day. "Could you tell him Aidan Murphy called? About the Toyota situation? He'll know what I mean." There was no Toyota situation, but Dale would spend the rest of the day wondering what I knew and what I might do with the information. Uncertainty was a powerful weapon when used correctly. Next, I drove to the office supply store and made copies of everything. The emails, the hotel receipts, the text messages, even photos I'd taken of their cars at the Marriott. I put one set in a safety deposit box at the bank and mailed another set to myself at the shop. If Sophie tried to destroy evidence, I'd still have backups. The real stroke of genius came that afternoon. I was installing new brake pads on a Honda Civic when inspiration struck. The car belonged to Jennifer Martinez, who worked in the mayor's office. She was also married to Tom Martinez, who sat on the city council and would be voting on Henderson and Associates' tourism contract. "Mrs. Martinez," I said when she came to pick up her car, "you know I don't usually get involved in politics, but I thought you should know something about that advertising company bidding on the tourism project." I didn't tell her everything. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I just mentioned that I'd heard some concerning rumors about the company's leadership and their commitment to family values. I suggested she might want to do some research before her husband voted. "What kind of rumors?" she asked. "The kind that make you wonder if these are the right people to represent our city's image." I left it at that. Sometimes the most effective seeds were the ones people planted in their own minds. Friday evening, Sophie came home early for the first time in weeks. She'd obviously been thinking about our situation because she had a new strategy: seduction. She cooked dinner, my favorite meal, and opened a bottle of wine. She wore the dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, the one that used to make me forget whatever we'd been arguing about. "I've been thinking about us," she said over dessert. "Maybe we've both made mistakes." "Have we?" "I know I haven't been the best wife lately. Work stress, you know. But that doesn't mean we can't fix this." She reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was soft, familiar, And for a moment, I almost believed her. "What about Dale?" I asked. "Dale is just... it's complicated. But you're my husband. That has to count for something." It used to count for everything. We made love that night for the first time in months. Sophie was enthusiastic, attentive, everything she used to be in the early years of our marriage. But I knew it was performance, not passion. She was buying time, trying to keep me manageable while she figured out her next move. I played along because it served my purposes. Let her think she was manipulating me. Let her believe I was the same trusting fool I'd been a week ago. Saturday morning, while Sophie slept in, I drove to Henderson and Associates. The building was mostly empty on weekends, but I knew Dale would be there. Men like him always worked Saturdays. It made them feel important. His BMW was in the parking lot, just as I'd expected. I parked next to it and waited. Dale emerged from the building around noon, talking on his phone and looking stressed. When he saw me leaning against his car, he ended his call quickly. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Thought we should talk man to man," I said. "Clear the air. There's nothing to discuss. Really, because I think there's quite a bit to discuss. Your relationship with my wife, for instance." Dale looked around nervously, checking to see if anyone was watching. The parking lot was empty except for us. "I don't know what Sophie has told you, but..." "Sophie didn't tell me anything. I figured it out myself. I'm not as clueless as you both think. Look, Aidan, Mr. Murphy to you." He straightened his tie, trying to regain his composure. "This is a complicated situation. Adults sometimes find themselves in difficult circumstances." "Is that what we're calling adultery now? A difficult circumstance?" "Sophie is unhappy in her marriage. She has been for years. I'm just trying to help her find some happiness." "How generous of you. I'm sure your wife Jennifer would appreciate your humanitarian efforts." The mention of his wife's name hit him like a physical blow. His face went pale, and I saw real fear in his eyes for the first time. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want you to end it. Today. No more meetings, no more hotel rooms, no more plans for the future. You're going to tell Sophie it's over, and you're going to mean it." "And if I don't?" I smiled at him, the same smile I used when explaining expensive car repairs to customers who thought they could negotiate. "Then Jennifer finds out about room 604. Your business partners find out. The city council finds out. Your daughters find out. Everyone finds out, Dale. And I promise you, the truth will be much uglier than whatever story you've been telling yourself." He stared at me for a long moment, probably trying to calculate his options. Finally, he nodded. "Fine, it's over." "Good. And Dale, if I find out you're lying, if I discover you're still seeing my wife behind my back, I'll make your life very unpleasant. Do we understand each other?" "Yes." I walked back to my truck, feeling better than I had in weeks. The first battle was won, but the war was far from over. Sophie would be furious when Dale dumped her, and she'd probably blame me for ruining her escape plan. She'd be right to blame me. I was just getting started. Sophie's phone rang at 8:30 Sunday morning. I was in the kitchen making breakfast when I heard her answer with her usual weekend voice, soft, intimate, expecting to hear from Dale. Instead, I heard her say, "What do you mean it's over? Dale, what are you talking about?" Then silence. Then, "He threatened you? How did he? Dale, don't you dare hang up on me." But apparently he did, because Sophie came downstairs 5 minutes later, looking like she'd been struck by lightning. "You talked to him," she said. It wasn't a question. "We had a conversation, man to man." "What did you say to him?" I flipped the eggs I was cooking, taking my time with the answer. I explained that his behavior was affecting my marriage. He seemed to understand. "You threatened him." "I informed him of potential consequences. There's a difference." Sophie sat down heavily at the kitchen table. For the first time since this whole mess started, she looked genuinely lost. "You don't understand what you've done," she said. "Dale and we have something special, something real." Had, past tense. And what you had was an affair, Sophie. Let's not dress it up as some grand romance. It was more than that. Was it? Because from where I sit, it looked like a middle-aged man taking advantage of his employees' marital problems. Pretty standard stuff, actually. She stared at me like I was a stranger. When did you become so cruel? About the same time you decided I was too stupid to notice you were cheating on me. The rest of Sunday passed in cold silence. Sophie tried calling Dale several times, but he didn't answer. I spent the day working in my garage, organizing tools, and enjoying the sound of her frustration echoing through the house. Monday morning brought new developments. Sophie left for work early, probably hoping to corner Dale at the office. I followed her at a distance, curious to see how their reunion would play out. I parked across the street from Henderson and Associates and watched Sophie's silver Lexus sit in the parking lot for 2 hours. She never went inside. Finally, around 10 a.m., Dale emerged from the building and walked over to her car. Their conversation lasted maybe 5 minutes, and I could see Sophie gesturing frantically through the windshield. Dale walked away while she was still talking. Sophie sat in her car for another hour before finally driving off. She looked defeated, broken in a way I'd never seen before. Part of me felt sorry for her. The larger part felt satisfied that justice was being served. That evening, she tried a different approach. "I want a divorce," she announced over dinner. "Okay." She'd clearly expected more of a reaction. "Okay? That's all you have to say? What would you like me to say? That I'm shocked? That I'll fight to save our marriage? We're past that point, Sophie. I'll get half of everything. The house, the business, your retirement accounts. You know that, right? Maybe. Or maybe the judge will be interested in hearing about your 6-month affair with your boss. Adultery still matters in divorce proceedings, especially when there's evidence." Her fork clattered against her plate. "You recorded us?" "I didn't need to. You documented everything yourselves. Emails, text messages, hotel receipts, credit card statements. You made it very easy for someone who was actually paying attention." The color drained from her face as she realized how much evidence I might have collected. She was finally beginning to understand that her husband wasn't as clueless as she'd believed. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want you to be honest. With me, with yourself, with everyone. Stop pretending this is about finding happiness or following your dreams. You had an affair because you were selfish and bored and you thought you could get away with it. And then what? We just pretend none of this happened? No, then we get divorced like adults. You move out, we split our assets fairly, and we try to minimize the damage to Emma. She doesn't know? Not yet. But she's not stupid either. She'll figure it out when you suddenly move in with your boss. Oh wait, that's not happening anymore, is it?" Sophie pushed her plate away and stood up. "I can't do this." "Can't do what? Have an honest conversation with your husband?" "I can't live like this, with you knowing everything, judging everything I do." "Then don't. Pack your things and leave. Get an apartment, figure out your life, start over. But do it honestly this time." She stared at me for a long moment, and I thought she might actually take my advice. Instead, she shook her head. "This isn't over, Aidan." "Yes, it is. You just haven't accepted it yet." Tuesday brought the first real surprise. I was at the shop around noon when a black Mercedes pulled up outside. The woman who got out was elegant, well-dressed, and furious. I recognized her from the Facebook photos. Jennifer Henderson, Dale's wife. "Are you Aidan Murphy?" she asked, marching into my shop like she owned the place. "Yes, ma'am. Can I help you?" "You can explain why you're spreading lies about my husband." So Dale had told her something, probably a sanitized version designed to make him look like the victim. I wiped my hands on a rag and gave her my full attention. What lies would those be? "You know exactly what I'm talking about. Dale said you've been harassing him, making accusations about some relationship with your wife." "Mrs. Henderson, I think you should sit down." "I don't want to sit down. I want you to stop whatever game you're playing and leave my family alone. I studied her face. The righteous anger, the absolute certainty that her husband was innocent. She really didn't know. Dale had managed to keep his affair secret from everyone except the participants. Ma'am, I'm not playing any games, but I think your husband hasn't been entirely honest with you about his relationship with my wife. Sophie works for him, that's all. Is that what he told you? Something in my tone must have gotten through to her, because her anger faltered slightly. She sat down on the folding chair I kept for customers. What are you saying? I went to my office and returned with a manila folder. Inside were copies of some of the less explicit emails between Sophie and Dale, along with hotel receipts and restaurant bills. I'm saying your husband has been having an affair with my wife for the past 6 months. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Jennifer Henderson read through the documents with growing horror. When she finished, she sat in silence for several minutes. These could be fake, she finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. They could be, but they're not. Why are you showing me this? Because you deserve to know the truth. Because your daughters deserve better than a father who lies to everyone he claims to love. And because Dale needs to face consequences for what he's done. She stood up slowly, clutching the folder. I need to go. Mrs. Henderson? I'm truly sorry. I know this isn't easy. She nodded without looking at me and walked out to her car. I watched her drive away and wondered if I'd just made a terrible mistake. Destroying Dale's marriage hadn't been part of my original plan, but it felt like the natural consequence of his actions. Sometimes the truth was its own form of revenge. Wednesday morning, Sophie came downstairs looking haggard. She'd barely slept, and it showed. Dale's wife knows, she said without preamble. I figured she might find out eventually. You told her. She came to me. I just showed her evidence of what you and Dale had been doing. My God, Aidan. Do you have any idea what you've done? Dale's marriage is over. His kids are devastated. The company is in chaos. That's unfortunate. Maybe Dale should have thought about those consequences before he started sleeping with his employee. This is revenge, isn't it? You're destroying his life because he had something you couldn't give me. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. The woman I'd married would never have blamed others for the consequences of her own choices. What Dale had was 6 months of hotel rooms and lies. If that's what you wanted from life, then I'm glad you're not getting it. She left for work without another word. I didn't expect to see her again that evening, and I was right. Around 6 p.m., she texted to say she was staying at her mother's house. That was fine with me. I had plans for the evening, and they'd be easier to execute without Sophie around to interfere. It was time for the next phase of my campaign. Thursday evening, I drove to Barbara's house in the upscale part of town. My mother-in-law had never liked me. I wasn't successful enough, refined enough, good enough for her precious daughter. Tonight, I was going to give her exactly what she expected. Sophie's car was in the driveway, along with a rental sedan I didn't recognize. Through the living room window, I could see several people sitting around Barbara's antique coffee table. It looked like a war council. I rang the doorbell and waited. Barbara answered, her face immediately hardening when she saw me. Aidan, what do you want? To talk to my wife. Sophie doesn't want to see you right now. I'm sure she doesn't. But we have things to discuss. Barbara tried to close the door, but I put my foot in the way, not aggressively, just firmly enough to keep it open. This is my house, she said. I can call the police. You could. But then you'd have to explain why your daughter is hiding here instead of dealing with her marriage like an adult. Sophie appeared behind her mother, looking exhausted. It's okay, Mom. Let him in. The living room was exactly what I'd expected. Expensive furniture, family photos from better times, and the lingering scent of Barbara's perfume. Sophie sat on the couch next to a woman I recognized as her sister Linda, who'd driven up from Boston. Across from them sat a man in an expensive suit who could only be their lawyer. Family meeting? I asked. We're discussing options, the lawyer said. I'm Richard Stern, representing Sophie in the divorce proceedings. Nice to meet you, Richard. I'm the clueless husband who's about to make your job very difficult. I sat down in Barbara's favorite armchair without being invited. The power dynamics in the room shifted immediately. This was supposed to be their territory, their advantage, but I was acting like I belonged here. Sophie tells me you've been harassing her employer, Barbara said. That's completely unacceptable. Is that what she told you? That I harassed Dale Henderson? You destroyed his marriage out of spite, Linda added. That's sick, Aidan. I looked around the room at these three women who'd clearly spent hours crafting a narrative that made Sophie the victim and me the villain. It was almost impressive how they'd managed to ignore the central fact of adultery. Let me make sure I understand, I said. Sophie has an affair with her married boss for 6 months. They plan to leave their respective spouses and start a new life together. But when I find out and put a stop to it, I'm the bad guy? You had no right to involve Dale's wife, Sophie said. Actually, I had every right. Just like she had the right to know that her husband was cheating on her. That wasn't your decision to make. I stood up and walked to the mantelpiece, where Barbara kept her collection of family photos. There was one from Sophie's and my wedding day, young, happy, full of hope for the future. You know what wasn't your decision to make? I said, picking up the photo. Deciding that our marriage was over without bothering to tell me. Planning your exit strategy while I made you coffee every morning. Spending our money on hotel rooms where you could pretend to be someone else's wife. I was unhappy, Sophie said quietly. I had been for years. So was I. The difference is, I tried to fix things instead of looking for someone else to fix them for me. Richard the lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Murphy, I understand you're upset, but threatening behavior won't help anyone. Who's threatening anyone? I'm just having a conversation with my family. Sophie says you've been following her, taking pictures, gathering information to use against her. Sophie says a lot of things. Most of them aren't true. I set the wedding photo back on the mantel and turned to face them. 4 against 1, but I held all the cards, and they knew it. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Sophie and I are getting divorced. We'll split our assets according to state law, minus whatever the judge decides to award me for her adultery. Sophie will find a new job. I doubt Henderson and Associates will be employing her much longer, given the circumstances, and everyone in this room will stop pretending that I'm the villain in this story. You can't dictate terms, Richard said. Can I? Because I have documentation of 6 months of adultery, including hotel receipts, explicit emails, and text messages. I have witnesses who saw them together. I have proof that Sophie used marital funds to finance her affair. How do you think that's going to play in divorce court? The room fell silent. Barbara looked like she'd swallowed something unpleasant. Linda stared at her sister with new understanding. Richard made notes on his legal pad. Sophie just looked defeated. What do you want from me? She asked. I want you to tell the truth. To your mother, your sister, your lawyer, and most importantly, to yourself. You didn't have an affair because you were unhappy. You had an affair because you're selfish and you thought you could get away with it. That's not... Yes, it is. You wanted the excitement of a secret relationship while keeping the security of a marriage. You wanted to feel desired by someone new while having someone familiar to fall back on. You wanted to have your cake and eat it too. Tears started rolling down Sophie's cheeks, but I wasn't finished. The worst part isn't even the cheating, I continued. It's the contempt. The way you talked about me to Dale like I was some pathetic fool who deserved to be deceived. The way you made me feel crazy for noticing that something was wrong. The way you're still trying to make this my fault. Aidan, please. I loved you, Sophie. For 22 years, I loved you more than anything else in the world. I would have done anything to make you happy, to fix whatever was broken between us. But instead of talking to me, instead of giving us a chance, You decided I wasn't worth the effort. The silence that followed was complete. Even Barbara, who always had something to say, sat quietly in her chair. So here's my final offer, I said. Uncontested divorce, 50-50 split of assets, no alimony. In exchange, I don't make the details of your affair public. Emma doesn't have to hear about her mother's hotel adventures. Your new employer, whoever that might be, doesn't get an anonymous tip about your professional ethics. Everyone gets to pretend you're just another couple who grew apart. And if I don't agree, Sophie asked, then we do this the hard way. Full disclosure, character witnesses, the complete documentary record of your relationship with Dale Henderson. Your choice. Richard whispered something in Sophie's ear. She nodded slowly. I'll take the deal, she said. Good. Richard can draw up the papers. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. For what it's worth, Sophie, I hope you find what you're looking for someday. I really do. But I hope you find it honestly next time. I left them sitting in Barbara's living room and drove home through the quiet streets of our neighborhood. The house felt different when I walked in, not empty, but peaceful, like a weight had been lifted. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Dad, Mom told me you guys are getting divorced. Are you okay? I typed back, I will be. How are you holding up? Sad but not surprised. Can we talk this weekend? Of course. I love you, kiddo. Love you too, Dad. I poured myself a whiskey and sat in my kitchen, looking around at the life Sophie and I had built together. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of dismantling it. I'd sell the house, probably downsize to something smaller. I'd rebuild my routines, rediscover who I was without her. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not the clueless husband who'd been taken for granted and deceived. Not the bitter man seeking revenge. Just Aidan Murphy, 48 years old, owner of a small business, father of a college student, survivor of a marriage that had run its course. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. I finished my whiskey, turned off the lights, and went upstairs to sleep in a bed that was finally, completely mine. Outside, the city settled into its nighttime rhythms. Somewhere across town, Sophie was probably lying awake in her childhood bedroom, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. Somewhere else, Dale Henderson was dealing with the wreckage of his own marriage and career. But that wasn't my concern anymore. I'd played the hand I'd been dealt, and I'd played it well. The rest was up to them.